Eating insects. Is it bad bug business? Welcome to Mark and Pete. Here's a thought.
If you like binging on a big bag of bugs or have a craving for crunchy, creepy critters, if mealworms are your meal along with slippery slugs, you have no taste and give everyone the jitters. Clergyman Pete. So. Grasshoppers, locusts and crickets are apparently the most popular for use in protein-rich flavours. Yum, yum. But is eating insects now big business? What say you?
Well, I think there are lots of predictions that eating insects are going to be the food of the future. And there are, of course, many parts of the world in which insects are a major part of the diet. But there is... and I'm going to come back to this again and again as we do this. The main feature, the main problem with eating insects is what might be called the Yuck factor, or we might say this. My response to this proposal of eating insects as a major part of your diet is ugh, because we don't like eating insects. If you don't like a certain food, it means you're not going to eat it. Now, eating insects, of course, won't necessarily be promoted as, just picking up a scratchy bug and putting it into your mouth while it's still struggling. That could be easily presented in different ways. But the main point is this. Meat is an important source of protein. Fat is our most important source of nutrients. We should be taking them from the natural part of our diet. Yes, some bugs could be eaten as part of our diet, but they shouldn't be the major source, because just going back through history, this is sometimes known as the paleo diet, or the paleo theory of food and nutrients, and that is that you eat what we originally ate. As our species developed, you eat what that has ate throughout its development instead of making a sudden break. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. We shouldn't break away from eating the source of food that we've always eaten, because there's almost certainly, in fact, I think certainly, going to be unforeseen bad consequences, bad bugs, in other words.
There's a consequence on a number of levels, and we've got to ask, why are we seeing this potential trend? Well, the main reason is that some people believe that, first of all, eating animals, such as cows, for example, is actually bad for us on a number of levels. One, because apparently cows emit far too much methane, and that's affecting the environment. On the other hand, it's also affecting the sustainability of source crops used to actually feed them. So, for example, growing things like soy, corn, and grain. Now, the fact is, human beings eat all of those, but of course, if you feed them back to the cows, that in theory will obviously deplete the much-needed foods for human beings. And then we get to the other side, which is that actually there is the belief that certain critters are actually good for us and rich with protein. Now, here's a thought before I give you my view on this. According to a report by US-based Global Markets Insights a few years ago, there was a trend pattern that was highlighted. Back in 2017, the market was apparently around $55 million, but it was projected to go up to about 710 by the year 2024. A little way to go, but many people believe that if we were to follow this path, it wouldn't go into the hundreds of millions, it could even go into the billions. But actually, here's the thing, because there are some concerns about eating critters. Please, we would advise, do not just simply pluck anything that's out of your garden and start chewing it, because there is a way in which it has to be prepared. Yes, folks, some of these critters actually spread disease. We don't want you to sort of continue doing that. Don't think that suddenly opening up your greenhouse is a good idea for a sustainable food source. Now, I do think that from a business perspective, I have concerns on one front, which is, look, the farming industry is fundamental to not just our health, nutritional foods, and etc., but to the economy. And it has had centuries of, sustainability and proven business ethics and values and systems. I also maintain that it is, as you've already highlighted, Clergyman Pete, that actually eating animals such as cows, pigs, and many other things actually is a good thing for you, because you need a balanced diet. And unfortunately, the amount of protein or amount of critters that you would need to eat could not possibly offset eating meat. Now, I know that there are many other ways, but I do think that I'm all for a business venture, and I do think it's a good idea. And I'm not saying to cut it out completely. But the bit here is this: to replace animal farming is a bad idea on a number of fronts. Now, if you want to keep the animal farming, that's one thing. If you want to sort of add it as another venture, well, that's up to you. I personally have never liked the idea of maybe crunching on a cockroach or, chewing on a cricket. It just seems quite abhorrent to me, because I think that, Clergyman Pete, let's go back to a biblical view. Plagues of locusts, my goodness, does this not suggest famine, etc.?
It does. And when John the Baptist was really roughing it, he fed on locusts and wild honey, although some people say locusts meant something different. That's certainly not clear. And it seems that anyway, he was more than likely eating insects, and that was seen as something he had to put up with because he was so ascetic and pious.
Yes.
So certainly from the biblical perspective, subsisting on insects is something you can do, and it can be done. God has effectively provided this extra source of nutrition, but it's not something you aim for. In fact, the promised land was flowing with milk and honey, which is delicious. You can make a great milkshake with that, but certainly not insects and honey. That isn't what was said. So if the Bible, in terms of aspiration of what you were to aim for that you should eat, doesn't include eating insects. And I believe, if we could just take this a bit further, that God has provided enough in his creation of the earth for us to be sustained, for its sustainable existence, with natural methods. And let's just take this example. Say having a normal farm, where you may have some normal farming with lots of different farms with different focuses, but still the overall farming industry will have cows and will have sheep. It will have all these animals, but it will also have some grain, some sources of plant food. You could introduce into that sources of insects. But what I would say is, let's in Britain stick to the British tradition of how you eat. Yes, there is insects, but not actually the insects being eaten, but the honey produced from the insects. Let's stick to these traditional forms. Let's keep the nutrition as it has always been, going back in time, because that's how humans can be healthy, but also the environment to be healthy. Now, the key thing I would say, just to finish this point, is that if you make a change, an intervention like that, which we did in sort of, say, for example, having mass farming techniques, we're using fertilizers, it has terrible side effects with diseases and allergies caused by all these chemicals, etc. Making such a rapid change because the science supposedly knows best, then is a big mistake, and we're just preparing for a future in which we're going to have a life of side effects from the big change that we made, and they're usually not good. Now, I know that Spider-Man, when I know spider isn't an insect, it's an arachnid, but it's the same sort of thing. He was bitten by one and he had superpowers, but usually people aren't affected in that way. Normally it's bad side effects. So stick to the traditional foods and just eat insects when you go and visit Thailand.
Yes. Well, that's certainly good advice. What I will say is, just sort of give you a conclusion. Sadly, Clergyman Pete, there is something that may be coming your way, because essentially across the United States and indeed in some European supermarkets, but it's heading through to the UK too, insect burgers and mealworm noodles are becoming far more commonplace. And I think it is something that you may start to see. What's even more worrying is, as certain people have highlighted, is that even things like cockroaches are being ground into insect flour. Effectively, the idea being is that you introduce the little critters into staple diets. So that once people start to sort of recognize that it's in there, it doesn't necessarily make a difference to the overall output. But of course, once you see cockroach appear on the flour, you get familiar with it. And then you think, well, why not a cockroach? Why not, say, for example, a mealworm? Why not then, something more crunchy? Because then you start to psychologically get used to it. Nice technique, folks. I'm still not convinced. So my advice is this. Yes, by all means, experiment. Don't make it mainstream by any means. And let's stick to our traditional farming foods. They do a very good job, folks. I can assure you that the farmers, I enjoy a good old munch on a cow when it's done nicely.
Yes. Well, when it's dead and cooked.
Well, indeed, that too. But also, I like the and think what cows do. They provide milk where we get cheese. We do other things with them. Let's not lose sight of that.
Yes, they also provide fertilizer for the ground.
Exactly.
Part of the natural environment. Now, insects are also part of the natural environment, but it all is. Think about it holistically. Yes. Don't make a big switch to a different sort of food, but from a misguided, dystopian prediction of the future. All those sort of predictions of the future that we've had in the past have been wrong.
I would like to know from our lovely crunchy listeners, what sort of things have they experimented with? Have they even eaten a mealworm? What do they think? Do they actually think differently? Do they like the idea of munching on a cockroach? Why don't they contact us and let us know?
Yes, let us know. markandpete.com is the way to contact us. Thanks for listening. That's all for Mark and myself for this week. Catch you next time. Bye for now.